Hello, everybody. I'm Shane Mauss. Welcome to the Here We Are podcast. My guest today is Kristina Durante. Kristina, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm
Hanging in there.
Hanging in there. Mostly just figuring out remote podcasting and taking care of weird tech issues with each and every one of my guests. This was a fun. It's every other one. Sometimes it's my guests, something they're doing wrong on their end, and then every other time it's something that I'm doing wrong on my end. You got the privilege of this one being my fault this time around.
It's usually my fault, so
congratulations.
This is a nice change of pace.
Yeah. Why don't you introduce yourself for the listeners and viewers and tell people what you do?
Sure. So my name is Kristina Durante, as you said. I'm a professor of marketing at Rutgers Business School. I'm also the research director for Rutgers Center for Women in Business. I am an evolutionary psychologist by training, and I do research on the decision-making of women and families. I'm very interested in how our evolved biology interacts with our modern social environment to influence behavior. So I kind of dial it back a few thousand years ago to the time of human brain evolution, to what kind of problems we were solving then and how we're now handling those problems in our modern environment, which is often a mismatch for how we lived for many, many thousands of years prior to the advent of, Starbucks and McDonald's on every corner and social media.
Yeah. Well, you're in luck. This is one of our favorite topics on the show. And so yeah, lots of evolutionary theory on here, and especially fascinated with the mismatch in our modern environment. I like to say we really weren't built for the world that we've built for ourselves, and and I especially, well, so you can go into as much of some of your background and work that you've done in the past to set this up, but I definitely at some point am very excited to get into what your thought is about this exceptionally modern new environment of quarantines. I've actually been thinking about women's issues at this time. But yeah, so however you want to kind of navigate into that. And we have all the time you want. So and we don't need to make the whole episode about this quarantine situation or whatever too. Just kind of I let my guests talk about whatever they're passionate about. So.
Okay. Well, I guess I can start wherever you want me to start, but yeah, the quarantine situation that we're in does bring up a definite mismatch kind of a situation, and has particularly, it can be particularly impactful for women in different ways than it is for men. I just think about how if you tell people don't travel to foreign exotic lands, that's easy. But if you tell people to stay away from their, friends and family, that's difficult. It's a difficult thing for humans to do. It's like telling them to stay away from, fatty foods and with, sugar. We have, an evolved, desire for these kind of foods. So to avoid them, it takes a lot of willpower, self-control, and workarounds for these, adaptive desires. And so, we see that playing out as we try to maintain social distance. We have to really be, it takes a lot of cognitive willpower to remember, I must stay away from other people. It's hard to do that. We want to be social. We're social animals. But of course, my brain went to, how is this going to impact women? And I immediately went on Google Scholar and looked at some of the other natural disasters. Nothing really like this with this sort of pandemic, but there has been other natural disasters where you can look at how it affects women differently from men. And now we're in a situation that's even different from, times of natural disaster where we're forced to telecommute. Everybody needs to stay at home. And we're in a time of economic peril, but it's not like a normal recession either. So we're moving into the home, and everybody has to, if you have a job, work from home. Kids are not in school. Daycares have closed. People are getting sick. And when those kinds of things happen, women bear the burden of it. Even if it's implicit. We have this, sex differentiated division of labor that has been around since we started walking on 2 feet and babies were born really helpless, where men and women needed to differentiate and specialize in different things to ensure the survival of offspring. In environments where mortality rate was 50 times what it is now, we still have that, implicit fallback to this division of labor where the women are the caregivers. And so it's going to be interesting to see if at the end of the road of this, if women are impacted negatively in terms of their careers or economically, or if the tide might go the other way, where men start doing more around the house just out of sheer necessity, and employers realize that productivity can be maintained while relaxing, at work schedules. So maybe it'll be, you'd only have to be at work 50% of the time, and we realize we can still get what we need to get done, and that'll make things more flexible for women. So we're just on the cusp of this now. So of course, as researchers, we're like, we've got to get on this. We got to see how this is going to fall out for women. And the hope is that it could be more of a positive thing, but right now our thought is that it's going to be a negative until maybe we'll adjust. I know I always have high hopes and optimism for how we'll be able to move through this. Maybe men will be taking more of the responsibility. Employers will get more flexible with schedules, which is good for women in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I go back. It depends on which side of the bed I wake up on in the morning.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's lots of exciting, like this could be the catalyst for major change. I think I've been saying this over and over again, which is certainly the working remotely thing. There will be, I believe, lots of because things could reset and people could go back to working business as usual. But I'll imagine that after 20 years of fighting the idea of working remotely, even though the internet's made it easy for many people to do that, there's been this historical of employers being like, well, if we aren't looking over their shoulders all of the time, how do we know that they're working? They might actually see an increase in productivity during this time. Certainly some businesses are sure to, and make some changes. And so that seems to me like it has some positive impacts, but it might, but all of the other stuff, I'm just like, every time I'm like, oh, maybe people will realize their carbon footprint. Then I go, and then we're going to strip every environmental regulation in the name of economic growth after this, and like, oh, maybe guys will start being better caretakers, and then like, oh, people drive each other crazy and domestic
and get divorced.
And so
I mean, like, I think about all the implications like that. It's like you're stuck at home now with each other, and that's it. And so either you're going to pull things together and maybe men will start doing more at home, or there'll be more divorces or more babies. I don't know. I think more divorces, but
I'm hoping not more babies. When people talk about the corona babies, I'm like, you're still, what does it take to get humans to stop? I mean, that's just life. That's how we've been wired, I guess. But what does it take to get people to be like, maybe now's not the best time to have kids? But they're so cute. Wouldn't they really brighten up the apocalypse? By
introducing all of these babies.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know.
but yeah, you're the Corona generation, like the baby boomers.
That's going to be interesting.
If actually happen, but
the Corona generation. Well, they're going to be weird kids, because even kids that are too young to be traumatized by PTSD of like what adults are going through, they're going to be, even under the best conditions, be having to distance from. That's going to make for some interesting social personality traits and behaviors and everything else that's going to be. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe is everyone just going to be like autistic or something, and all the Corona babies? I have no idea.
I mean, it could be. There's so many factors. It's like when you bring babies in a time of stress too, you know, I mean, that's right. You know, that even maternal environment might not be the best. There's so many things that, you know, to think about. But yeah, I don't know. Whenever you're stuck at home, like if there's like a snowstorm, maybe there, you know, any of these natural disasters that happen or that make you homebound, it's like this is when, you know, people are making babies like in the winter, and then everybody, and then the summer fall babies come later. But one of the things I thought so although, you know, now my research has sort of moved into the decision making of women as they become mothers and, you know, they're older. My research began, you know, I think because I was, you know, younger then too. It was about how women compete with each other for mates. Women's competition in general, women's status anxiety, and how that makes them competitive with each other in an indirect way, sometimes going under the radar. I don't think people really realize how fiercely women do compete with each other. And the first place I started looking was in the way that they dress and enhance their attractiveness.
So a lot more skin on Instagram during an apocalypse.
During an apocalypse, I know. It's like, it's funny because there is a relationship.
This is the sexiest apocalypse I ever imagined.
You insert apocalypse, and then the outcome is, you know, more skin, sexy clothes, you know, women, you know, enhancing attractiveness.
Well, men yell at each other more.
Yeah. Basically, any disaster, you're going to see like a relaxation of women's sexuality and, you know, how, you know, promiscuous they are in terms of their social media, I guess, too. But
we don't have to worry about promiscuity too much right now, I guess.
No, I mean, you can put anything out on social media, but no one's really coming into your house. So like from here up, I can be attractive, and what you don't know is I'm wearing sweatpants.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you can.
Oh, you're wearing pants? Oh, okay. It's still putting pants on. That's
still putting. Well, you know.
I gave up on pants 2 weeks ago.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
It's like. Just your underwear, just like whatever, or nothing. I don't know.
It's every day's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to learn the term shirt cocking about 2 months ago, so it's very.
I've never heard that.
It's also referred to as Donald ducking. It's like a Burning Man. It's like a Burning Man thing where like everyone wants to be nude, but some people don't want to get their shoulders burned, so they'll still throw on a shirt.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
So then there's a whole like, hey, do we like this or do we? It's not very aesthetically pleasing, but we respect people's rights to like take their clothes off and be free without getting sunburned. So it's a whole like debate on the Burning Man culture of whether we are for or against shirt cocking.
Well, I've learned something in the few minutes we've been talking.
Sometimes I get to teach scientists things.
Yeah. I like it.
It's usually I was touring around with the anthropologist who's incredibly verbally fluent, and I learned about 1,000 words a day from her, and I taught her words like podunk. I don't know, something.
She didn't know what podunk is? Is that like, does that mean in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, it's like hillbilly-ish. I'm from rural Wisconsin, and she's
I'm from Wisconsin.
New York City girl. So, where?
Elkhorn?
Elkhorn? I don't know Elkhorn. I'm outside of La Crosse, Wisconsin. I'm actually I live full time on the road, and I started doing that last April, because I had this as my dream to do so, and I had the successful science comedy show taking off for me that I was touring with, and then when the apocalypse happened, I was like, oh, I'll hunker down in my and my parents. Haven't gotten to visit them for a little while, not realizing how long this was going to be.
Oh, is that where you are right now?
And now I'm in my parents' basement. I'm in my childhood bedroom right now. So I have this digital background on here,
funny.
because otherwise you'd see the sad little corner that I'm stuck in.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You'd never know that.
Never know. No, I look like I'm in space.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's speaking of how costly children are. My parents are finding out how costly children are with their first child turning 40 in their basement next month.
Oh, well, happy early birthday to you. Yeah, I don't know if, how do costs like ebb and flow with children. They are very expensive.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I have two that could run in here at any minute and tell me I need lunch. And they have, while I've been teaching class online now.
Yeah,
that's another thing.
Every academic's been worrying about the blend of home and work life.
Yeah.
For me, I haven't made a differentiation between work and my regular life in like 15 years. So I'm kind of like built for this. But yeah, this is in terms of being a mother. I mean, you have situations where there's now maybe more stay-at-home dads. I imagine things were trending toward like a bit more stay-at-home dad situations than certainly in our evolutionary past, or even like certainly the last few hundred years.
Yeah.
And now I imagine there's a lot more. I mean, this is just such a complicated. There's also the like custody battle situations of like, now can kids go to their dads on weekends, or can you do every other week? There's just like endless amounts of parenting and relationship complications that are so novel.
Yeah, that's true. And I do think that there are more stay-at-home, certainly the idea of a stay-at-home dad is not new anymore. There are more men that do it or that work from home. At least in like middle class, it's more like I don't think we see it as much in, lower income population. If we do, it's probably, through unemployment. I think that, and I don't know for sure, but if I remember correctly, I think that we are seeing a trend toward more of that, but not significantly so where we wouldn't see implications for, division of labor problems with how to divide unpaid work within the home, especially in times where everybody's at home. It sort of exacerbates or highlights rather the issue of here, and I think of this ad for, I think it was for Alexa, like the Amazon Alexa. And the premise was a mom of a newborn baby is going back to work, and the dad is going to be staying home with the baby. And the mom basically has to teach Alexa how to teach the dad how to take care of the child. So Alexa's reminding him, now you gotta get up and make, the afternoon bottle. Now you've gotta put the child down for a nap, So basically it was, the dad couldn't have cared for the child without the, the help of the training that she gave to Alexa. So I know that, I think there have been studies that have shown that even with the stay-at-home trend, women do still take on more. And that could also be because women just sort of automatically, maneuver in that direction and, have different tolerances for how a home is kept compared to men. So they just sort of, do it. Even my daughter, she plays this, both of my kids play, it's like a Roblox game where you build a house, and my daughter likes to have it, she loves making a home. Like, it's kind of like a gender difference that sort of we see. And, there is nature, there is nurture, but we come with these sort of predilections towards different things, men and women. On average, there's a bell curve to everything. So not all women, and not all girls, not all boys, insert behavior X. But my daughter likes to design this house, and, and if my son puts it together, he'll just have a garage. But my daughter makes it real nice in there, and it's just, I see it, she was showing it to me earlier today, and I see that. So it could be that women just kind of robotically motor through and like to have things their certain way. And that's certainly part of it.
Wasn't there a study where they gave a variety of different toys and things to play with to juvenile chimps, and the males would pick more like toy trucks and stuff like that, and the females would pick like dolls and things more often?
Yeah, that happened. And so we're talking about, non-human primates, where there certainly wasn't any learning. Not to say that there's not learning, but they weren't playing, these male chimps weren't playing video games to learn how to, be rough and tumble. It was just sort of a natural, especially when you're, very young, it's just sort of a natural tendency that comes out.
And there wasn't like other male chimps calling the male chimps gay if they grabbed the doll to play with, or whatever would have happened when I was growing up in the 80s. Or maybe that's all they're saying. I guess we don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that is. I guess we don't know chimp. Well, at least I'm not an expert in chimp communication, but yeah. So we can assume that, there is no socially constructed, norms where if you play with a doll and you're a male chimp, you're, called a sissy or whatever. It's just, we evolved to specialize in different things, as males and females, particularly primates. So, males are involved in more risk taking. They're better at, group cooperation. Males can be in high conflict with another male 1 minute and then cooperate with them very seamlessly the next, because this came in very handy for intergroup warfare and protection of your social network or your group. But women,
they can hold a grudge for longer.
Oh yeah, so it's
and they have their grudges very organized and everything.
They're very calculating. Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Nice little grudge lists and like reprioritizing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, women need continuous, information on relationships and it needs to be maintained. They, instead of, you know, doing different reciprocal kindnesses for one another where it gets put into a bank account, it's almost like in an hourglass where it's, and this is, you know, how many women keep track of relationships, whether it's romantic or with a you know, a family member or a friend. It's, you know, we want to constantly know information about what's the status of this one-on-one partnership that we have. Have you called me in a week? Have you disappeared off the face of the earth? You know, my now ex-husband, but when we were together, we'd be going to these weddings and I'd never heard of these people, these friends of his. Oh, that's my, you know, frat brother from Michigan. And I'm like, well, I never heard of them. Yeah, we don't talk much, but they're going to each other's weddings. And it's like, I would never have a friend that would just pop up and we'd travel somewhere for them. So it's a weaker friendship ties. And, you know, women are, you know, when they talk to one another or even with, you know, same gender, anybody, it's like we're face to face, looking in each other's eyes, you know, getting as much information as we can from that person. We have a really high bar, whereas men kind of just stand next to each other and look at football. I mean, they don't really, you know, talk intimately. So women are really good at one-on-one relationships and men are really good at group coordination and hierarchical structuring. And so
I get to hear my my adorable mother who recently retired just in the nick of time last fall, but she's just loving she's just on she's just on the phone all day every day, calling every person she's ever talked to and ever met, and she's loving it.
Yeah, checking in and yeah, that's you know, that's the hard thing about being in quarantine now. You want to check in on everybody.
Yeah.
Thank God for technology. If this would have happened 10 years, 20 years ago, 30 years ago,
yeah,
it would have been near impossible. It would have been significantly a lot harder. We'd see a lot more. You know, for the first couple of weeks, I was stir crazy. I was out of sorts, didn't know why, which happens when we go through change to get back to a normal structure. But I think a lot of that is you lose, you know, your normal routine where you're seeing people. And now now we've all moved online. And in some ways, your brain is categorizing these people that we see in our screen as people in our group and our friends and in our social network, but it's something off about it. You know, it's not dimensional, you know, the way that we're used to.
I mean, but it's also at the same time, for all the mismatches that it's also telling of how evolved we are for our capacity for tool use and flexibility is really breathtaking. And because if this was pre-internet, you know, that all of our hospitals would have collapsed by now, but we're able to come together and distance and do this thing and just stay alive and get through it and survive. And most of what we're concerned about right now is just like missing hugging people, you know, which is like, I do think this is going to have some real long-term detriments on people. There's going to be individual differences, but still, it's like considering that if this had happened in like 1980 or something, this is we are pretty fortunate
in that way. Yeah. And I'm like you, I'm more of my sister had sent me something because she's kind of like me. It's like we kind of just like, I can't wait till this quarantine is over so I can go back to my normal routine of sitting on the couch and, you know, trying to get out of plans. Because I'm kind of an introvert anyway. So it's like, I haven't really felt like so burdened by the movement online. I'm someone who also, I get really, you know, it takes a lot out of me to get up in front of a audience and teach my class. And so I find myself more relaxed now when I'm online with my students. So I'm not on the end of it where it's like, at least yet, that I'm totally missing the social interaction. I guess because the little that I need, I get enough of maybe online through like these Zoom meetings where you're, you know, having a Brady Bunch kind of setup with all these faces. It's you know, certainly there was no precedent for that during, you know, the time of human evolution, brain evolution. So we're still kind of picking up on these are our people, and they're popping in, and, you know, so kind of mirrors what we'd be doing a little bit.
I mean, there's also, I mean, bonding can mean a lot of different things. And I will say that, you know, if I compare, so being, I'm a fellow introvert. People normally don't believe that because I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm happy for me to talk at large groups of people. One-on-one stuff, I can be very awkward sometimes. And you know, I like these interviews. I just feel like I can relate to scientists better, but otherwise in regular in terms of small talk, I can be very, very awkward.
Me too.
And so, you know, my upbringing, and I could ask my mom right now, she would tell you that I was the shyest child anyone had ever seen. But I remember growing up and my, you know, I had a warm, loving Midwestern upbringing, but also it's not like everyone was like big huggers or anything like that anyway back then, you know. And definitely people weren't big sharers. It was like you talk about, and it still rings true today, you talk about the Packers and the weather and everything, and this apocalypse is like, oh my God, this is the first real conversation about anything of substance that I've like ever had with like certain family members and certain friends of mine and stuff like that. So and that's, you know, that's bonding, that's being social. So in some ways we're bonding on new levels.
It's interesting because I'm the same way. I'm really socially awkward but that what you're talking about, the small talk, you know, I could say like, oh, I don't like small talk. Like I'd rather get into really deep conversations, but I don't like small talk because I get nervous with it. You know,
me too.
You know, and if I'm nervous to begin with, somebody will be like, hey, how are you? And I'm like, you too, or something. And then I'm like, wait, no, they didn't ask me that. They asked me, you know, because I'm just like, I don't know, but you know, but that's but that is essentially like the social grooming that, you know, non-human primates do. It's just kind of like, it's meaningless, like the weather and this, and it is meaningless. And it isn't deep, but it is what many people do. Yeah. And it's like just a norm, like to be like, you know,
and
how's the weather by you? It's so safe.
It's just a way of, I always looked at it as just like people trying to be like, I like you. We're talking right now. Like that's basically what they're saying.
Yes, exactly. But then I feel like you have to have like a lot more in the bucket than I have available to pull from. So then I hate dead air, like to be like, you know, so how's the weather? Good. Oh, did you say Tiger King?
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's like that's one thing that I talk
That's
to my
everyone's
neighbors
water
about.
cooler talk now.
Yeah, exactly. I've been talking about that in my MBA classes too, when we talk about you know, my classes are a lot about persuasion, social influence, and, you know, how humans are wired to, you know, on the surface, it seems weird, you know, when we watch Tiger King, these, you know, they're almost these cult-like situations that seem like, are these characters real? How could this happen? And then so we talk about how it happens even with us in small ways through, you know, the various commitments that we make and how much we want our behavior and attitudes to sort of align. So if like Joe Exotic approaches you at the gas station, you don't have anywhere else to go, and he has, he's giving you even a little bit of money or a sandwich or a cigarette, that's, the classic escalating ladder of commitment, and you accept it. Well, Joe must be a decent guy, and if you accept a little more, then that's brainwashing, right? It's like then you're even more involved with him. So that's why they get a lot of down and out folks that were there, and they were some of them were pretty loyal and stayed around, and as husbands that were straight that were there.
Yeah,
it's hard in those ways. And Carol Baskin, who had her people volunteering, she didn't pay them, but that's when you really get loyalty.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? No one's forcing me to. I must really love it. Love it here.
Yeah.
But anyway, I brought up all of these like
That's
social psychology.
Fascinating. I hadn't really thought about that. That's great.
Social psychology, all these different, aspects of it that pop up in Tiger King. I was fascinated. My neighbors kept telling me, you got to watch this. And I'm like, I don't watch things like, it just doesn't my taste.
Yeah.
But we've all been stuck in here. So eventually I'm like, well, maybe I'll check it out. And then I was like,
first
like
episode, I was
else.
like, okay, I get it. It's crazy. Second episode, I was like, oh. Okay.
Yeah, there's just so much.
There's a lot.
So much involved in that. Yeah.
There's a lot. Who knew wildlife traffickers could be so wacky?
Yeah. And the luring women with these exotic pets.
Yeah. I get it. I get zoo privileges and aquarium privileges and stuff anywhere that I go. I'm always using that VIP access whenever I can. Guilty.
It's such a powerful tool in your mating toolkit.
It really is.
Want to check out some exotic animals with me?
Hey, you gotta use what you have. I mean, at what point is it advertising, and at what point is it manipulation? Those are tricky things to say. I mean, I often think that we're always manipulating each other and ourselves at some level. I mean, I'm really big into the evolution of self-deception, as I'm sure is something you're interested in as well.
Yeah, I think we're doing it all the time. I mean, it's really hard to live a life day to day, so we have to reframe situations in our head all the time, and often that involves self-deception. And some of these adaptations that we see work in a way in which we do self-deceive. We do deceive ourselves. One time in a paper when I was writing about one of these specific deceptions, I called it, women are deluding themselves. I called it a delusion. And then I got in the review process, don't call it that. Call it an overperception of, it was interest, that isn't really there. Like when we're receivers of something, when we're an observer of something, we're really accurate in terms of picking up on the manipulation. But when we're on the receiving end, that's when we sort of transform things in a positive way, or overestimate things, or whether it's our vulnerability to a disease, or how much the sexy cat across the street likes us or not. We do tend to engage in that, and it just makes life a little bit more palatable, easier. It's a little protective. I mean, look at the lengths that humans will go to not admit that they're wrong about something, or that they made a mistake about something. Right.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's really
look
hard
at the
to
Pied
do.
Piper and giving daily addresses right now. It's pretty insane.
Yeah. Wait, which one are you talking about? Trump or?
Yeah, Trump.
Yeah. Yes. So
Not that
that's
he's
an
even
interesting case.
necessarily an outlier, but
Right.
in terms of he's not the only manipulator in town, but
No,
still,
but
he's
he is
breathtaking.
yeah, he's pretty good at it. You know, he knew where he could gain the most support, and he worked very hard to assimilate himself to what those folks cared about, what they found motivating, what most resonated with them. And he speaks directly to them and he cuts through. And, you know, I have a lot of friends and family who, you know, do support him.
Me too.
And I'm like, what? Yeah, you're from Wisconsin, so I don't know. Maybe, you know, most of my family, they live there, and they're very supportive. And so when he talks, to them, he's so charismatic because he's speaking right to the way that they, you know, are going to process information, or they want to process information. I mean, it's just on their level. They're lifers.
There's also, it's a good example of just what we all do all of the time in terms of the like tinted goggles that we look through life where so I saw this great clip of, so what Fox News started taking to is like, Trump will get on and he'll go, so this corona thing, this and that, and then he'll get in, like, you know, reading a script that they've given him and begged him to stick to. And then he goes off on his like rant about the fake news, and Fox has started muting him during that time, and then they get on and they're like, this is our great president Donald Trump talking about the corona, and then they just keep on talking as he's doing, like, and my ratings are the best. They just keep on talking through all of that, and then once he gets back out to his script again, then they go back to him, so that you don't hear all of the insanity. And that's like, but we do that ourselves all of the time, where we hear the things that we want to hear and exclude the things that we don't want to hear. Every single one of us. It's just for me a very easy example, because I'm an outsider, as someone who has never cared for Donald Trump. I can see this behavior from afar. Someone outside of my behavior could see my many blind spots better than me.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You know, the people that we would maybe tend to follow, you know, they're not perfect either, but you know, it goes back to, you know, little tiny things that you do, you know, thinking about, like, how do you know, those 19% of people who voted for Joe Exotic, or the people who worked for him, you know, it's like, oh my God. But it's like you start to publicly talk about your opinions and your attitudes, and who you like to read, and who you liked, you know, what, even, you know, for us, like, what scientists, you know, it's really hard to, when you come up on information that suggests that person isn't who you thought they were, it's really hard for us to let go of, you know, our liking for them, because we've been talking about it publicly. And, you know, we just, it happens at a non-conscious level, where, you know, once our behavior is going in a direction, our attitudes have to match up to that behavior. So if I find myself taking things from, you know, that Joe Exotic is giving me, or that Hitler is giving me, or if I, you know, if Trump says that, you know, he's all for the whatever the issue is, and then I, you know, place a vote for him, it's really hard then to be like, you know what, I was wrong. You know, I thought Trump today, now I think Joe Biden, you know, flip-flopping, you know, back over the course of thousands of years of human history, somebody who, you know, said one thing and then did another. I mean, this was, you know, a hypocrite, or somebody who we couldn't really trust for them to say that they're going to do something and then they're going to do it. So we sort of have a hardwired mechanism to remain as consistent as we humanly possibly can, because it served us really well thousands of years ago, even in the face of information that suggests it might not be the right way to go. So it's really hard to circle back.
Yeah, I mean,
on
as
that.
someone who is a proud flip-flopper and constantly, I love changing in my mind. I love saying that I was wrong about things. But one of the negative sides, and it's what I love about talking with scientists, they say I don't know more than any human being on Earth. But one of the downsides, in terms of, this is kind of related to like self-deception in a way, is that I
Mhm.
sometimes find my own thoughts and opinions so inconsistent that it's so hard to even have confidence in myself. Like I don't know the
Yeah,
person I'm going to be when I wake up tomorrow, so it makes it hard.
yeah, yeah.
It makes it hard to plan.
That's interesting. I'm kind of like that too, and I wonder why. I mean, I guess because I do face different pieces of information, and then I'm like, oh, okay, that logic doesn't fit. Let me, I don't know if that's what makes a scientist is to be able to, have different ideas about it could go this way or this way. Where's the data going to fall? And then if you get, information that suggests that that data might be wrong, okay, then you adjust.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's not saying that I'm perfect or all scientists are perfect at that, but maybe maybe there is something to that. Like if you have, like your brain is set up to sort of take in information and then, adjust your thoughts according to, just basically be able to update your logic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe there's individual differences in
Yeah,
that. Again,
I mean, it might have been a pre-existing thing before, in the same way that someone is maybe gets into sports. Is it because they trained really well and were coached really well, or and practiced a lot, or did they practice a lot because they had a natural inclination and like more dexterity
right.
or endurance
Yeah.
or whatever? So they were good at it, and that's why they did it more. It might be that scientists were just people that are a little more flexible thinkers are just a little more drawn to science because they aren't as
Yeah.
like discouraged when they find out that they're wrong or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Anyway, that just occurred to me.
So,
Like maybe that's the case.
so what are you jumping on? Are you? We started the conversation. You said you were a little bit optimistic, potentially, in terms of some silver linings culturally,
Right.
but individually in
Yeah.
terms of your work life. Are
Yeah.
you jumping at this thing, or are you looking at it like a marathon? Or are you like, we need to get all the data right now, this is such a unique situation? What opportunities, or have you launched any studies yourself, or what, any exciting things that you're looking at exploring?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I'm the research director for the Center for Women in Business. Now, there are many other centers throughout, even just Rutgers University, that focus on women and work. There are other centers that focus on the abuse that could increase in a situation like this, the domestic violence issues that might be exacerbated in these kinds of times. Rutgers isn't the only university that is sort of jumping, like you said, like on, we better, this is the moment where we need to start collecting data so that we can, over the long term, as this pandemic evolves, as we then flatten the curve and little by little get back to normal, we want to be able to have the data that's rich enough to be able to look at how these things have played out in terms of and what we're looking at is sort of the household dynamics of balancing the unpaid work in the home versus the paid work that now you have to do in the home, how that's going to influence things like job satisfaction or even promotion and merit later on. That's sort of where where we're focused. Some of my other colleagues are focused more on the sort of marital implications of the domestic violence that might occur, which we know happens in times of crises, that gets exacerbated. And so in a way we are, let's get on it, and there's been a lot of funding that has opened up to specifically look at how this pandemic is going to affect us, and different research groups are looking at different outcomes, because we've never faced anything like this before. I mean, it's a landmark jolt in our way of life. And so it's going to have many implications, and some of them are going to be neutral, some of them are going to be positive, and some of them are going to be negative. And so we want to figure out what those are, just so, we can, if it's something negative, if we can raise awareness to this. Sometimes these things happen, they're just implicit, but we need to make people aware of how things are affecting women in the home now that we have to care for multiple people. Men get sick at a higher rate than women do. And so that might mean even more caregiving responsibilities, especially if there's, kids at home that have special needs. And so, down the road, we would like to find out just how severe some of these ramifications might be for women and their job performance. And, if they are laid off, many women are laid off in now the service industry. Many women are in the service industry, and that's at a standstill now. Whereas in a recession, just a general recession, I think that hits men more in terms of employment. But this kind of a situation is potentially more devastating to women who are doing more in the service industry, which has taken a huge hit. Even like daycares that are laying people off, and that's mostly women. So to answer your question, yes, but we don't have any answers yet. We're just
one thing that's going to be particularly devastating to women and children is the impact of domestic abuse is obviously going to be quite lopsided. Is there any is there any, I'm trying to think of like when there's like temporary spikes in like during the football season, like domestic abuse goes up when the home team loses, it goes up in that area. And I don't know if there's any historical data or anything on the subject that could help specifically to this situation, or even in terms of what works best in terms of like stricter laws or more commercials on TV, or just getting the information out there. What are some of the more effective tools?
It's interesting. Maybe I didn't know that about football games, but I guess I would presume, because we know that, we like to include ourselves with our favorite sports teams. It's like, we're part of them and we're a fan. It's like, like a warfare type of tribal loyalty. So even though it sounds trivial, so your team lost, that would have an impact on domestic abuse. And we know that when in natural disasters, that tends to increase the sexual and other abuse of women. So I think what we can do now is just sort of raise the awareness. I've even seen some things on social media where people are posting, like, if you're in a situation where you don't feel safe, send me a direct message about that you need the recipe for this cake or something. And if you're in imminent danger because of violence, ask me about the strawberry topping that goes with it. Just like codes to, if you're in a situation and if you need me to call the police, say this. I've seen that going around on Facebook. But I think just raising the awareness too of the resources that are out there for women in terms of local shelters and food pantries, and I think that a lot of times women aren't aware of where they can go to get help. It's a scary situation because women are wired to be risk averse, because a lot of times we're also caring for children and their survival depending on us too, and so we don't want to exacerbate the problem. Sometimes leaving feels like it exacerbates the problem. So I think just getting information about local resources that can help, even if it's not leaving, it's just, helping with other things, whether it's providing food, I think that helps. But yeah, definitely could be through PSAs or raising awareness that this is happening, and it happens more in times of crises. Is important. I don't think people realize it. It is kind of, when you think about it logically, it makes sense, but I don't think they're thinking about it. Although, I'm not, I think there's more strife in any relationship when you're forced to be around them all the time. And when there's unemployment, all of these negative things, are potentially much more devastating than football teams losing. So it could be even worse.
So where could people go to find out more about you and organizations that you work for, or any other past papers and stuff?
Sure. Well, I'm on Twitter at Kristina Durante, and awesome. You can certainly find me at Rutgers Business School. And I have a webpage, KristinaDurante.com, and I'm on LinkedIn. So you pretty much find me everywhere, awesome. Social media wise.
Well, this is a great conversation. We covered some important stuff, had some thought-provoking ideas in there, had a couple laughs along the way. This is terrific. Make sure to send me all those links, and I'll include them in all of the description and everything. And I really appreciate you being on the show.
All right, will do. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, listeners, for being such wonderful people. We'll talk with you next episode.
Are we?
Yes.
Where are we?
Here.
Why are we here? Not entirely clear. We are misfits thrust into existence by random chance, with no hints at all as to how we're supposed to make sense of it all. It's immensely bizarre. Here we are.